Yeah. Trying something in between actually completely redoing the UI and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I need to rework the chat box, honestly. So I'm just gonna remove that for now. And I need to figure out, like, how to make the text bigger, how to make, the, just, like, everything about it fit better. There's no time. We'll figure it out. Thank you. I did this a while ago for something else that I was working on, but I didn't really like it. So I wanted to rework it some other day, but still no time. It is my favorite. I go and sit in Ultraland all the time. Just to, like, listen to the music. I need this orchestron roll. I've never needed an orchestron roll as much as this one song. I mean, like, I wanted it for, like, the near raids and stuff, right? But it's not out yet, and I want it. So I need this roll. Hey, Sunburns! Yeah, I don't think it's out yet. Fortunately, there's no solid loop, so I'm just gonna have to keep replaying it myself. Hold on, let me make sure everything is set up for the mission. Hey, Cheese! Hey, Hermit! Hey, Potato! Or Potatum. The Endwalker one? Is it? I looked up Soken's, but is it the last one? It seems like he uploaded with Shadowbringers. If you can link it to me, that'd be excellent. Hello, hello! Welcome to the stream. Title this and save it so that we're good. Okay. I was just kind of drawing, so we can start with that first. Just gonna talk. Let's transition the music. Hello, hello. They might release it within the coming, I don't know, year or so. Is the music okay? I turn myself up. I'm not actually talking directly into my mic right now. So I just want to make sure that music is still playing, that you can still hear me. Okay, cool. Yeah, okay, let's just start drawing for a little bit. I'm probably not gonna really advertise this stream very much, because, like, I don't know. I think I just want to have, like, quiet stream tonight. Yeah, I am. This week was kind of stressful, so we're just gonna do some drawing. It wasn't like a hard week. It just was kind of a busy week. It was filled with a lot of stuff. And you know, some weeks just kind of hit you harder than others, even if what you're doing isn't necessarily all that different. So, I don't know. I just kind of felt like this week had a lot of ups and downs, but it's okay. We got through it. We all did. Oh, you did. That was fast. When did you file? Hey, Ragnar. Ah, okay, I see. Yeah, I filed a couple days ago, and I paid it off, like last week or something, so probably be waiting a while to hear back. I need to get, like, an accountant or something. I hate doing taxes. I hate it so much. I know they, like, try to make it super streamlined, but hey, Amanda. Welcome, welcome. Stephen Uneven, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub for 19 months. And also, thank you, Tojo, for 28 months of tier 1 sub. Thank you, thank you. I can't believe it's been that long since we've had affiliate. That's actually pretty crazy. My personal accountant. I just need someone to help me make sure. I remember seeing this, like, tweet a while ago. It's like, the vast majority of people aren't evading taxes, but there's just a perpetual fear that through your own stupidity you are unintentionally committing tax fraud just by not being able to do your taxes correctly, and I am in constant fear of that. I try my best. I use TurboTax, so it's like, you know, kind of automated in a way, but yeah, sometimes I'm just worried because, like, I work freelance sometimes, and then I'm full-time, but then sometimes I just get, like, weird jobs, so it's a little weird. It's hard to know how it all factors in, but I should do a better job of it as I get more used to doing it. It is not my strong suit, though, finances. Yeah, the freelance TurboTax thing is quite pricey. Did you experience much self-doubt about achieving art as a career throughout your journey? I'm graduating soon and realizing that I would have learned more from other classes online than my 3-year degree. Sick of doing assignments, which I find not helpful to my growth as an artist. This only fuels my doubt that I won't make it in the industry. So I guess my doubt was kind of reframed differently. I definitely doubted whether or not I'd be successful, but whether or not I'd actually go into art was never the question. But I've definitely had the fear of, like, I don't know if I'll actually be able to, like, do the work, do the job well in a way that I think is, like, my idea of success and my idea of, like, this was a good job well done, or this was like a good result. I didn't know if I would, like, be able to match up to what I thought was a good either employee or a good professional, because I wasn't sure if I was up to snuff for that, and I still feel that way. But I think it's good to evaluate for yourself and think about it objectively, like, because there's been such a tide within art about arts education and how much can you sort of how much can you privatize and how much can you sort of I forget what the word was, but, like, how can you make art a curriculum without forcing all of the individual needs of students out of a curriculum? Like, how can you possibly make this curriculum work for everyone when art is almost an incredibly personal experience, right? That's why in the past, arts education was almost primarily done through mentorships and working directly with a teacher who knew you and your problems and your habits super intrinsically, right? So as schools became more and more about copying the classic academic structure, it became a question of, does art fit that structure? Can it fit that structure? And you have to think for yourself, like, does it work for you? And I think you're recognizing that for you, it felt as if it didn't. It felt like maybe it didn't hit the points that you were looking for. And that's I think a pretty common place to be post-graduation, is you're starting to think about yourself not in the context of a student, but in the context of, like, I now have to put all this stuff to the test. And I think that self-doubt is quite common, and also, like, I don't think it's weird or it's concerning that you're feeling that way. Because when you kind of start to contextualize your future into things that have to be put into action, you start having to second guess how much value has the last couple of years of your life brought to what is now the future, what is now your current forward momentum, and being able to think about that objectively is helpful, because if you don't feel ready, I think that is a stepping stone to figuring out what are you looking for, or what do you think you need in order to feel like you have the tools you need, right? What do you feel like you're missing out on currently so that you have the tools that you need to confidently move forward in this space? Because being able to assess that for yourself is a pretty important skill that they don't really teach you in school, right? Your teachers will tell you what you're missing, but you know, you kind of rely on going to class and getting critique and learning what other people see is lacking in your work. But being able to do that now for yourself is going to be the most important skill you take with you for the rest of your career. So I wouldn't think about it from the sense of like you won't make it, but this is the challenge, right? This is the new challenge. The new challenge is you now have to figure out, like, if you think about yourself like a complex puzzle piece, right? A puzzle piece that can shift shapes. You can gear your skill, kind of like skill set into fitting into whatever other jigsaw puzzle these like other companies represent, right? If you want to work for a company, if you want to work freelance, if you want to be self-employed and have your own stuff going on, if you want to be a content creator, like those are different equations, different situations that require different skill sets. And you have to now figure out for yourself, if I'm missing certain things in my skill set that I need in order to achieve a place in the industry that I want, now's the time to figure out what you're missing. Whether or not school gave that to you is a different thing. Whether or not it was worth the money is a different thing. But if you feel like you're lacking, it's good to start having that conversation about what specifically do you think is lacking. What have other educational platforms offered that you felt like you are missing, that you need? And you can start taking that information and using that to combat the kind of stagnation that comes from self-doubt, right? Because doubt is paralyzing. It's a weed, right? It's not, as soon as it's planted, it doesn't need any attention. It'll just keep growing. And it can either stop you from, you know, putting a pause on this like self-fulfilling prophecy of feeling like you won't make it, so then you don't put any effort or thought into thinking about how can you ensure that you're equipped with all of the skills that you need in order to give yourself the best opportunity, right? Whether or not that's figuring out if you need to join certain communities, if you need to find a way to put yourself in spaces with other people, if that means networking, or if that means technical skill, if that means taking up mentorships or finding a new work-life balance that isn't glamorous but is going to help you gain the foothold you need in order to make these decisions for yourself. Because I think breaking into the industry, I feel like is not nearly as glamorous as a lot of people frame it to be. Like, you could make this grand entrance into the industry by kicking the door down and joining all these like AAA studios or whatever. And again, I think about this from the perspective of working in games, but I think the vast majority of people find their way in very slowly, very gently, either through working for third-party studios, or kind of working their way up to places that maybe when they were in school weren't super glamorous, but to actually start working, it all kind of mellows out, really, the sort of stardom of it all. But this is just a long way of saying, yes, self-doubt is everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And I think it's good that you're recognizing where that doubt is coming from, or at least symptoms. And I think it'll make it easier for you to tackle the specific gaps in your skill set that you feel like need to be there in order for you to best compete within this kind of like new incoming generation of creatives, right? I wouldn't let it stop you, but it is good to think objectively and critically about things that you're good at, things that you can specialize in to make yourself a unique candidate in that area, but then also things that you probably should also work on, so that you're not just like one thing you are very good at. Like, you can be a specialist with also a bunch of other different auxiliary skills, which I think is more commonly what people end up being. And whatever, you know, personally is gratifying for you to do, is what I think you should focus on. Do you recommend Fiverr to start as a freelance artist? I didn't use Fiverr because Fiverr used to be kind of shady, but I think it's pretty okay now. So, I think a lot of people nowadays will use Fiverr as sort of like a more casual freelance gig sort of a place. So probably. I'd say I've also, I don't know, seen people use community forums or like Reddit and stuff for like more casual things, but I've never personally used Fiverr. I can't recommend it myself, but I think it's outgrown its more sketchy connotation nowadays. Sai 1, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub. Can you give us tips for creatures or beast designs, please? I'm not much of a creature designer, if I'm honest. So I don't know if I would be able to give you very much advice. From what I have learned from people who are much more intelligent than I, and a lot more oriented towards creature design. And this is true for all design. The desire to make things look strange and alien, no matter how far you want to make something unique, you still have to base it all on reality. And often it doesn't really require a total revolution, like, reinventing the wheel sort of scenario for you to make a really cool and interesting and unique concept. It just requires a tasteful kind of prioritizing of a concept, a gimmick, a hook for your design, that really brings everything around this central idea, whether or not it's a function, whether or not it's an appeal, a look, or an aesthetic. And everything else kind of helps to support that, both in color palette and texture and anatomy, and basing it off of how things currently work, how things exist, knowing animal anatomy, knowing how that works across a bunch of different types, whether or not that's an avian, whether or not those are like canines, knowing skulls, bone structure between like birds and bipedal and quadrupedal animals, like all of those things, knowing the actual foundational real world examples of things is crucial for being a good creature monster designer, because you don't need to invent the wheel too much to make a fantastic creature design. I've seen the art books for Monster Hunter are really good very often. Their creature designs are really well thought out, and it's a pretty good, I think, kind of example of really thinking through the design through having a purpose, right? Because all of them have to be designed around a mechanic or a game function or a behavior. And a lot of their anatomy and a lot of their design choices are based off of reestablishing that connection with that main, like, hook, right. So you could look at creature design art books. Some of them are a lot more helpful than others. But I am not a creature designer. Animals are very much not my thing. Even though I've had to design some in the past, it is definitely not my strong suit, and I would recommend going to the experts on this one. Oh, nice. What's the color scheme? I pretty much almost exclusively use like textured G pen type pens, or like the 6B pencil that everyone uses. I don't like super smooth pens. I don't like super thin pens. I don't like ones that have too much of like a width, thickness to thinness, like pen pressure look. So usually textured pens. I have seen his stuff. I love Satoshi Kon. What's my favorite part about working freelance? You get to work on a ton more projects, I think. Like, you get more opportunities to work on a variety of projects. When you get kind of when you get put on a team and when you work with the same group of people, you kind of get an idea for sort of what the company tastes are, how higher level executives and developers within a company or within a studio or a team tend to lean towards when it comes to either mechanics or style or whatnot. And so that will often dictate whether or not you can do like certain types of projects. But when you are a freelancer, you could work anywhere, right? You could work on a ton of different projects at once or specialize in a certain type of thing like illustration for books, or doing like editorial stuff or doing like comics or something like that. But you could do a whole bunch of different genres. Like, freelance is great for that. If you feel like you don't really want to be stuck working on one thing, or you want to have kind of a choice over what you work on, I think working freelance and contract is a great way to go about that. Do you have a favorite manga artist? My favorite manga artist probably the author of Otoyo Megatari, and then also Witch Hat Atelier. So that would be Karumori Kamome Shirahama, I think. Also the like author of Fullmetal Alchemist. The One Punch Man artist is also really good. There are quite a few. The Popo. I read a lot of manga when I was a kid, so there are definitely quite a few that I'm not thinking of right now. They are. How to study other character artists? I don't know what you mean. Like, how to do master copies or what? Thank you, Fox. Thank you, Luila. Study any character in general. Hey, Cole. I feel like I still don't understand exactly. Like character design, you mean? Like how do you study character design of pre-existing characters? Yeah, it's been pretty chill. I've just been drawing random things. Well, I guess, it depends on why you like the character, right? I think that's an important first step to recognize. If you like a character design, why do you like it? And it's important to distinguish whether or not you like that character because they have a cool story or because you like the fact that, you know, they're your type, right, as a human. It's important to recognize when it's the design that's interesting to you. And that can be hard to figure out, but, you know, things that I look forward to in a pre-existing character design that I like is a good spread of detail. I like when characters have enough detail to be interesting, but not enough to be overwhelming, or too busy, right? Where everything is super, you know, all these like tiny, small details everywhere is really distracting. I like characters that have an interesting shape, silhouette. It could be body type. It could be the clothes that they're wearing. I like when I feel like there's more to their story when I look at them. And, you know, those are things that I'm interested in as an artist. And for me, that's kind of what I look for in a character. So when I'm studying characters, I want to first recognize the reasons why I like a character. Could be that I think they have a really good balance, or they have a good core hook or core concept. So, like, certain characters are totally about one thing, right? Like, oh, what is that character from Guilty Gear that has the big anchor girl? May. Okay, so like this character, okay, I need her to not be moving in the picture that I picked for her. This character fundamentally as a design is not that interesting, right? But the main part about her, this is actually not the best picture to pick for her, but I don't really want to pick fan art for her. The main thing about her design, right, is that she has this giant anchor. The fact that it's so big and she's so small is the whole point. If you actually think about her design from a costuming standpoint, it's not that interesting. Her whole thing is just yellow, like orange. I almost said yellow. But the fact that she has this big weapon on her that's not a normal weapon, right? It's not a gun, it's not a sword, it's not anything classic. it's an anchor, something that you don't see as a common weapon, right? So that's the interesting part about her character. That's what her whole character is about. So that's the idea of a hook. Certain characters have hooks, certain characters don't, right? If you are interested in characters that have hooks, like an anchor or a giant sword or whatever, it's important to recognize that, because that's one way to design a character. But you look at her, everything else about her, and I gotta say, I don't really think her design is that good, but everything else about her is to support the main idea, which is the anchor. The anchor is associated with things that are sea ocean related, right? So she has this kind of pirate cap that is more casual looking because she herself is a casual character, right? She, in her newer design, she's wearing like an oversized hoodie. She's wearing like biker shorts and sneakers. So that's kind of her shtick. And certain characters are made more interesting because they have a hook like that. What are other characters I like? Let's say, actually, I don't even know. So, okay, another character. Testament is a great design. Another character, which I will use precisely because I think a reason why some people like characters is just because the character is their type. I'm going to use 2B from Nier Automata. So in the most general sense, right? 2B is just a woman. Like, she is just a woman with a sword. That's all she is, right? And for some people, it's kind of the sex appeal, right, that is interesting about her. People like her because she looks kind of like a maid, kind of gothic. That's the whole appeal. She's wearing all black. She has like a black-white monochromatic thing going on. It's a very simple concept. Not too complicated. Overall, very few details about her that make her visually distinct. But 2B has a central thing to her appeal, in my opinion. 2B is actually pretty conservative when it comes to attractive female character designs. Granted, she has a big ass. That's one thing. But 2B is actually quite conservative because for the most part, she's pretty covered, right? She's, for a hot character, for a character that's meant to be attractive, she's not showing a lot of her skin, right? What she is showing, though, is really important because those are specific areas that people find attractive. She shows the back, she shows a bit of her neck, she shows her chest, and she shows leg, thigh, butt, whatever. But the rest of her is relatively covered, and that's kind of the core part about her character design, is that 2B is this slightly suggestive, but overall pretty simple character design. And the fact that she has this giant skirt, poofy sleeves, and kind of this sharp feather at the bottom of her sleeves, that's the part of her design that is out of the ordinary, right? Otherwise, if you just kind of look at her, she's just a lady. But she's got aspects to her that make her interesting. She's appealing because she's not overly complicated, but she's got very specific reasons why she's designed the way that she is. Not the best character design, but she's functional for what she's doing. And this is one very specific reason why 2B is attractive to certain people, why she is a good character design to certain people. So you could like all these characters, you could like none of these characters, right? You could think that characters that are super functional and super realistic, like, let's just go with, the character that I personally don't think is all that cool looking sometimes, but for the vast majority of people is one of the most iconic designs ever made. And I'm gonna piss off my own partner for this one, Master Chief, is, in my opinion, not the best looking character. But, you know, here's the thing, right? Master Chief is interesting because Master Chief is a mixture of a bunch of things. He has one central element to him that people like. Not like. He's recognizable because he has this just bright yellow visor right in the middle of his helmet, right? That in itself is an immediate attention grabber. I'm looking at this from a design perspective. I don't know anything about Halo or Master Chief, right? So don't come at me from that perspective. Just talking about design, because I'm only talking about design. His armor has a very specific shape language because the game is very specifically set in this kind of militaristic, futuristic era, and therefore technology has a very militaristic, futuristic edge. They decided that for Halo, this is what technology looks like. That's fine, whatever. So his design has to be functional because pretty much in all circumstances, this is what he's wearing. And it's not about necessarily this power fantasy of looking hot or being particularly appealing, because that's not what Halo's about. This character, in very specifically, is a completely utilitarian character. But design-wise, right, he's got a helmet that is very recognizable. It's got this kind of not super real-world helmet design, but still functionally works. It's got this big, bright yellow visor, which is what everyone recognizes him for, right? And it's opaque, right? His whole identity is not necessarily, like, you don't see his face. So, you know, there's a whole appeal there. And this might be the kind of character design that you really enjoy. It might be you like him because of his story, of the games that he's in, of the time that you've spent playing as him or with him. That could be the reason why you like Master Chief, or you could like him visually, or you could like Guilty Gear visually, or you could like, you know, Final Fantasy, any of the Nintendo games. Like, you could like them visually, not other things, and that's your taste, right? And it's important to recognize what is your taste. First thing when studying characters is you have to figure out who or what you like in a character design. Because only once you figure that out can you then take a step back and say, objectively, what about this character design is good? What about this character design, for me, adds to their concept? Because that's the most important thing about characters. It's not whether or not a character is, attractive or has the best, most dramatic silhouette, right? I think there are certain characters that are designed to just look like character designs. Personally, I don't find that those designs are the best. I don't think designs that are just meant to look like cool characters are necessarily all that interesting, because I like the idea of things being behind a character. In that way, complicated designs are not always indicators of good or even interesting designs. Just as overly simple designs doesn't even necessarily mean it's well designed either. So, in animation, it becomes really important because you have limited real estate for that. And that's like a whole nother topic. But when you're looking at how do you study a character design, first off, it's important to know what are your tastes. And secondly, it's important to place that design up against the character to figure out, does this design serve the character's purpose? Does it serve this character's story, place in the world, their job, their journey, the genre that they represent, the personality that they have? I think those things are really important when it comes to design, and it's important to make sure that a character suits, or the look of a character suits the character's own story, own established information. And then you have to figure out, to who does this character, or who is this character for, right? What is this character for? Is this character meant to be someone that is heroic, cool, interesting, someone that you aspire to be? Or is this character meant to be more so a realistic representation of something, right? Or is this character meant to be closer to a representation of an idea, of a feeling, of a of a mood or an atmosphere? Are they dark to be dark? Or are they meant to be attractive to people? That changes how a character is designed. So all of those things coming together for you to figure out, when you look at a character that you like, or a character that you see out there, and you want to study them for their design. First, separate all of the things like story, get rid of your attachment to them, because if you look at just the design of a character, new things come up, right, visually. But ultimately, it also kind of has to tie back into the story just a little bit. But you'll realize that a lot of the most popular characters out there are not the best designs. But they don't have to be. It just so happens that we conflate our feelings with a character, the story that they're in, the IP that they're in, and it sometimes translates into good character design. But design can be very much individual, and I think it's important to recognize when that's the reason you're looking at a character, right? Looking at it from an arts perspective requires you to judge it by different standards, different core pillars, and if you're gonna look at it from that perspective, you have to know objectively whether or not what you're looking at, is it because it's your personal taste, or is it because these are objectively well-designed shapes, well-proportioned characters, good level of detail, all that kind of stuff, right? What's a character you think has one of the best designs? This is gonna be a self-report. I really love Unit 01 from Evangelion. Okay, Joker Joker's a taste thing, okay? I have a crush on him. That's whatever. I think Unit 01 from Evangelion is a great design. I think it's got a great hook. I think, there are so many different versions of this that now it's really hard to say, like, what is the most iconic version of this character. But I think just everything about the shape design, I think everything about the way that they've been animated, the giant shoulders are just, I don't know why I like them so much. The horn is so weird, but I like it. I don't know. I love I love one. It has been, I think, my favorite mech design for a very long time. And something about it. This is very satisfying. It's, and I don't know if it's because I like Evangelion. I don't think I like it as much as other people do. I pretty much just like Unit 01. Because something about their design just makes me happy every time I see it. It might just be the weird long limbs, the proportions. I think the colors are placed really well. The head is fantastic and gruesome. It's good. So yeah, I really like Unit 01. Being alien. Because I don't know. It unlocked something in my brain when I was a kid, and now I can't take that out of my brain anymore. It's too good. Mech designs in Gurren Lagann is good. They were really good. Because Yoshinari did them, and I am a Yoshinari stan. I'm a big fan. I'll die for him. They're good. Not my favorite mech designs, but way better than a lot of the mechs that currently exist out there, because I struggle to like a lot of the Gundam designs. I don't like any of the Transformers designs, except for Bumblebee. Is that his name? B, the yellow one. I don't like a lot of mechs that are currently out there, but I thought the Gurren Lagann ones were fun. Bumblebee's cute. Bumblebee is also the only one with like a super big personality that is like that outstrips their own design. So it's kind of like, do I like Bumblebee because I like the design, or do I like Bumblebee because Bumblebee is cute? You know, I don't know. Valkyries and Macross? I actually have... Oh, no. It's got the Gundam look that I don't really like. Unfortunately. Yeah. Not my thing. I'll give Darling in the Franxx the props for having interesting mech designs. I don't like Darling in the Franxx, though. Oh, Pacific Rim had some pretty good mech designs. Yeah. But I also just like Pacific Rim as a movie. So I can't tell if that colors my taste for them. Darling in the Franxx, I think I wanted to like Darling in the Franxx because it was the first like mech thing in a really long time that had mechs that I thought were interesting. And again, I like the mechs in that show. I think they're really cool. I don't like anything else about the show though. The characters are aggravating. The style is really cute, unfortunately. The story is unfortunate. I can't. Which made me really sad because I really wanted to like it, but... Hey, White Lion! Hunter 2011 ends at Chimera Ant art, and it makes me sad. Do you have any tips on drawing backgrounds for beginners? I feel like I really shouldn't be giving advice on drawing environments or backgrounds because I'm not very well versed in that kind of stuff. But I don't know. It's hard to say, cause when people say tips, like, they're not. I feel like tips aren't the thing that people are really looking for, right? It's like, is the easy way to summarize that, like, I don't want the whole spiel, but there's probably something that's super helpful that you could condense into one thing, right? Something very specific. But the topic itself is broad. And how do you condense a whole specialization into tips and tricks to do this thing, especially in something that I personally am not well versed in, that I'm still struggling to learn. I don't think I have the confidence really to say anything other than, like, here are the fundamentals that you need to know, that you will probably have to learn at some point if you don't already know them. So much wrapped up in that it's kind of overwhelming. I say most important things to learn about, not backgrounds, right, but environments, is they're very much like characters, as people try to explain them to me. They're very much like characters in that they have to serve a purpose within the context of the piece, right? If you're doing an environment for a character, what's more important? You have to figure out what is important about this environment. You have to figure out what's important about this composition. Being able to focus the environment around what is important is the easiest thing to lose when you are trying to get into it for the first time, right? Because you're so concerned about, like, oh, I gotta render, like, these trees and this texture and this leaf and all of this fog effects and lighting and stuff. Very easy to lose track of the main important thing, which is whatever the environment is for, whatever the background is for. If that is to make the character look, or make the character the focus, then everything has to lead back to the character, right? If the character is not the focus, but it's something in the background, then everything has to lead to that. Ways to do that is through perspective, it's through lighting, it's through values, it's through color, it's through composition, it's through, like, the kind of type of shot itself. Is it a wide shot, you know, or wide angle, like all that kind of stuff. It's the rhythm, it's the flow, it's all of those things wrapped together. So, you know, when you have so many things you have to think about, most important thing is to make sure that you're going into an environment with one purpose in mind, which is, what are you making the environment for? And there's everything else, right? You should get a feel for learning about value in the context of environments, right? Lighting is a crucial part of environments. And being able, like, thumbnailing, what are you trying to thumbnail, right? A lot of people will do thumbnails of the value comp, or the value composition, which is not necessarily what the environment's about. It's about how the values are placed within the thumbnail, within the piece, right? And you do, like, quick black and white drawings of what that looks like, where the light hits, what shape does the light make, what shapes do the shadows make. without any of the detail. Then, there's thumbnailing, which is laying out all of your major structures and major focal points and stuff, so that you can see, like, using stuff like rule of thirds, or like, horizons, and, or like the S shape that people always teach you, or whatever. Going back into space and perspective and all those things kind of coming together, leading lines, overlapping, all those things. Thumbnailing can be great for that. But you gotta learn what you are trying to thumbnail. And so it's good to start looking at value comps, value studies of environments to get a feel for what's important about environments, right? If you've done characters your whole life, or so far, you're going to be very focused in thinking about environments by prioritizing. You still will prioritize the character over the environment. When you're trying to get into doing backgrounds, you have to figure out what's now important for you to prioritize when you're working in backgrounds, in environments. It's the focus, the lighting, the assembly of props or objects within a composition, is learning about composition, and all of the tips, tricks, and ultimately just the foundations of these different specializations. That's why getting into environments and backgrounds is kind of a multi-stage thing, and why you can't just give tips on it, because tips are one-off pieces of advice, but I don't think that's what you're looking for. What advice can you give to visualize or draw without structure? I think I'm drawing too fast. Well, drawing too fast is one thing, right? If you're drawing too fast, actively try to slow yourself down. It's kind of the only thing you can do, right? And that can either be forcing yourself to think through the next thing that you're drawing, or it can be drawing, things like drawing with a pen and forcing yourself to plan ahead or think about things or problem solve if you make a mistake, like that kind of stuff. So when I visualize things, I try to think about it from multiple perspectives of, first I try to visualize potential ways that the drawing can proceed. Like, from here, what are the potential ways that I can draw this face, right? What are the different expressions? What are the different perspectives? And so that's one way to think about it, right? I envision the face before I draw it. Next way is I use the moments that I'm drawing lines to redefine what potential possibilities there are, potential solutions to this problem. Thinking on the fly as opposed to thinking ahead, right? That's another way to visualize something, because instead of necessarily planning ahead, I'm just problem solving with the things that are currently here. I have bits and elements of the equation. I have to fill in for what's left, to make that equation work, right? And it's a different way to work, but it means that I'm constantly having to look at the whole piece itself and figure out what can I move around, what is it that I'm working with, and make my decisions from there. What advice in terms of visualizing a draw structure? I'd say get used to inventing. Get used to working from imagination and working out your problems and then checking them after. Get used to evaluating your work on the fly, and challenge yourself to make these decisions more and more often in your own work. Ways that I think the more concrete way that I kind of sort of trained myself was I started drawing almost exclusively in pen back in high school. because I really wanted to force myself to think more, to slow down and think more. So I started drawing in pen, and that kind of forced me to make my decisions carefully if I didn't want to completely waste a drawing. Didn't turn out all the time, but it got me to start thinking in a way that allowed me to problem solve on the fly. And nowadays, I function in a very similar way when I draw digitally. I try to basically work in the same condition even though I can erase. And kind of let that dictate how I draw. It's after years of doing that I can sort of do it now without literally using a pen. What's the difference between purposeful practice and repetition? Also, if I try to purposely practice heads, what would that session consist of? Difference between purposeful practice and repetition. Purposeful practice is the in my mind. The act of giving every action that you make a reason, so that they all work towards an ultimate goal. Repetition is simply just the kind of cycle of doing something with the goal of doing it, right? You can make repetition purposeful practice, but repetition isn't automatically purposeful. And I think that's kind of the thing, is like, I'm not necessarily against the idea of repetition, of trying something again and again and doing something again and again. It's whether or not each repetition means something more than just doing it for the sake of doing it, right? And that's the key. I think ultimately people want to believe that with each repetition they're enforcing something, but that isn't necessarily what they're doing. Quantity does not necessarily mean change. Just by doing something every day for a long period of time, or just by doing one exercise a ton of different ways, doesn't necessarily mean you've learned anything from that experience. A portrait a day for several months does not necessarily mean that with every portrait you learned something, or reinforced a new lesson, or changed an old habit. But you could do a portrait every day and do them with a specific purpose, so that each time you do a portrait, you're making one deep, very significant change to the way that you think and approach that exercise. And ultimately, it's not something that can happen just by saying you're gonna do it purposefully. It's you have to be cognizant of that determination. You have to be cognizant of the choice that, like, you're going to be present, you're going to be there, and like in your mind, very much down to earth and sort of in the trenches with what you're working with. Because with art, with studies, with anything, it's very easy to just sort of turn your brain off and do it. Do the exercise, draw the box, do the head study, do the figure study, write down the names of muscles, and do a study of this photo of this hot girl on Instagram, you know, like, very easy to just do that and not think about it at all. And I think that often stems from a lack of purpose, a lack of seriously going into something with an outcome, with a desired outcome. Wanting to go into a head study, but not knowing what you want out of it, other than, I want to get better at drawing heads. That's not a real outcome. That's a goal. That's not something that you can get just by doing one study. Like, more from a, just like, realistic standpoint, I think you could. I think it's very rare. I don't like thinking in rare circumstances. I'd rather think of, what can I actually achieve in this study, in this hour that I do this thing? I could realistically achieve figuring out what value I can make the under eye, the eye bags, so that they don't look super dark or super weird, but I can make my eye bags look natural the next time I paint a head, right? Or I can draw my nostrils right the next time I draw a head. Or I can place the nose lower on the face, because I know now that when I do photo studies, that's what tends to happen. I find that I draw my noses too high. So the next time I practice a head, next time I draw a head after doing the study, I know now that I want to push them down lower than I automatically do. So now I'm reinforcing a new muscle memory, a new habit, and that's what I'm trying to change. That's the outcome I'm trying to get from this study. It's small, it's targeted, it's purposeful. You go into something with a reason to come out of it. You go into something specifically wanting to make a difference in what you already typically do, what you think is normal or what you think is standard, what your body tends to do or what your hands tends to do. You go in with a very specific goal of changing that. And then every time you draw after that, you reinforce that and everything else you've been learning, right? That's how you make incremental change. That's where purposeful practice comes in. That's what repetition doesn't do, because repetition doesn't account for desired outcomes and consistent, permanent change. And that's why I recommend to people to spend a little bit more time thinking about what it is that they want to get out of something. Because oftentimes you hear about, oh, you know, really good exercise to do when you want to learn how to do, like, characters is to figure draw. Well, you could draw figures for the rest of your life. You could do studies of photographs of models for the rest of your life and not exactly know what you were supposed to get out of it from the beginning. And so, for me, I can't, in good faith, tell people exercises or things to do, because I think all of those exercises could work. Master copies work just as well as they don't work, and studies and figure drawing works just as well as it doesn't work. What matters is what you go into it planning on getting out of it. And to frame it like that is all you really need to start the journey into really understanding how you learn, how you best retain information, and how you specifically need information either provided to you or how you need to parse through kind of the onslaught of arts education online. Because everyone has a different way of describing something. It's difficult to figure out whether or not how they're describing it is useful, whether or not what they're saying is something that's actually helpful to you or is actually just not going to mesh with how you think, as opposed to blindly just doing any exercise that people recommend. I don't really stand by exercises because I think there's a way to mesh study and personal art and fun together, but that's a completely different conversation. What's your favorite type of background to look at, not illustrate? I like cityscapes. I hate drawing them. I can't. can't paint them. But cityscapes are fun to look at. I like seeing architecture. It's fun. Thoughts on the Alan Walker design? God, he's had so many is the problem. I love Alan Walker, okay? D. Grayman is my shit. I fucking love Katsura Hoshino. She's been my childhood, like, you know, manga artist for so long. Like, and it's hard for me to parse whether or not I like his design, again, from an objective standpoint, or if I like it because I grew up with it. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think a lot of his designs are actually that cool. His face is iconic, right? His tattoo is very much him, and that's kind of his thing. His arm changes a lot of different times during the course of his story. The uniform that they wear gets a little bit too stripy. Like, it's not, I don't think, it's not super iconic in itself, and I don't think it's rather unique. But like, I just like Alan Walker so much. So every time he just appears, I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. You can do anything, and I'd be like, hell yeah. You go for it, Alan. I'll support you. I think his Crown Clown era was probably his most, like, iconic for me. But I don't know if he's changed since then, really, because I haven't really kept up with D. Grayman. I don't know if it's updated at all. I'd say art school helped me put some stuff into perspective, and it's kind of hard to quantify the benefit that art school gave me, right? Because skill-wise, I didn't learn a lot. Like, technical, in a technical sense, I didn't learn a lot. Mainly because I wasn't in a lot of technical classes when I was at school. I think a lot of that came from, like, time spent outside of class really evaluating my own work. And so that wasn't necessarily something I thought I got out of my art school, which is not the case for a lot of people, because I've met quite a few people whose work before and after college is like day and night, right? But I think the perspective I got from school was really important, and the value of that cannot be overstated. The habits, the mentality, the sort of philosophy of the teachers that I had, and the people that I met, and the growing up that I did while I was there, I think has fundamentally changed the way that I look at art, how I treat art, how I go about my work. It changed my thoughts about design. It changed how I approached it. It gave me a stepping stone so then I can, you know, go from that bottom line and start moving forward. So in that way, I think school for me was very valuable, and I don't regret it. I don't think it was everything I hoped it would be, but I also didn't think that was going to happen, right? I didn't have in my head the idea that art school was going to do anything for me that I probably couldn't also do myself, but the fact that I had alternating opinions and I had teachers with different life histories and backstories and different ways of seeing things to help me get to that stage faster. The fact that I could do all that at a school that I thought had a really good cast of teachers at the time that I went, and some students that I felt like really helped me grow up a little bit more so that I was prepared to take on that information. Indispensable to me personally, and I don't think I would be the same person today not having had that experience. So, I think art school is really important for me, and I don't regret going there, and I don't regret the money that I've spent. Even the fact that I went to 2 different schools, the first one being Savannah College of Art and Design, that I felt like ultimately was not going to give me the experience I wanted, but still gave me something regardless. It gave me a new appreciation for classical foundational fine art, and it really changed how I kind of approach, I think, my future in art. Even though I transferred away and I went to a new school, that impact still stays with me. Just as the fact that I didn't finish my time at Laguna College of Art and Design, which ended up being my last school that I went to, even though I didn't finish my time there, I still felt like what I got out of it was indispensable. And I don't regret my time, don't regret the money, don't regret my experiences at all. There's an undercut. Have a hard time getting used to drawing human faces. I've studied anatomy, but it's not working too well for me. I feel it has more to do with figuring out the basic shapes. I could use a simpler structure. I wonder if you have any tips for that. So there's a point when you have to transition from anatomy to applying foundation to your work. And I think there is a disconnect between what people generally find like appealing or attractive in art sometimes that doesn't actually lend itself super well to a lot of the foundational stuff. So like if you're super into anime styles, or stylized cartoon styles, learning the human face anatomically is not going to help you much. But when you start getting into things that are a lot more complex, like painting, getting into semi-realism, all that kind of stuff, that's when certain things start coming back into the fold. So it could be that now that you've spent some time really looking at anatomy in a more traditional classical way, you are now having to grapple with what is essentially the rest of the journey, right? The rest of the drawing, which is the style, the appeal, the aesthetic, the abstraction of reality. Because I feel like the vast majority of people, especially people who look at my stuff, are not super into the super fine art, super realistic. And so if you are coming away from doing clean cut anatomy studies, then your next problem is going to be leaving that, learning when you can break the rules, what does it mean to break the rules, in a way that still doesn't undercut the structure and the fundamentals, is going to be the next big problem. Right. So, I've heard of some people doing stylized face studies, where they'll do studies of people's drawings of stylized faces, especially people whose proportions they really like. So you could start trying to do stuff like that, figuring out what are your tastes when it comes to drawing faces. What is your preference? What are the things that you think are appealing, or even just suits your idea of what a good drawing of a head is. And that sort of problem comes with the idea of, like, what do you get to leave behind? What are the things that you can kind of soften, not draw, things that you can sort of smooth out instead of detailing out as you would on a more realistic face. That takes a little bit of time to figure out, because, you know, I draw faces in a bunch of different ways. And after quite a while of drawing in a bunch of different styles, I know what it means to draw in a more anime style than it means to draw in a semi-realistic style, and so on and so forth. Painting in a bunch of different styles too means that I know when certain bone structures and muscle structures matter and when they don't. So I'd say experiment, see what you like, evaluate what you like, what are your tastes, and start seeing in all those artists that you enjoy, what is it that they do? What is it that they leave out? What are the things that they try to keep in to maintain structure? Because even the most anime of anime styles and the most abstract of cartoon or any kind of non-realistic style still has some level of fundamental to them. Until you get too far away and then it's, you know, Picasso all over the place. So, my advice, here's the fun part. Adapting the fundamentals to your preferred direction in art. It's also the most complicated and the thing that you'll spend the rest of your life doing. But that's probably where you're at, right? If you know the fundamentals, now it's applying it, adapting it to your tastes. And you can start doing that by figuring out what your tastes are. Generally, though, if you're looking to do that, things that I've discovered, more attractive faces tend to be a lot simpler, right? For people, they tend to not draw certain things, like the under eye, not drawing, like, the nostril completely, not drawing wrinkles or laugh lines or smile lines, smoothing out bone structures, not drawing as many folds around the eyes, or the nose, or the lips, or the forehead. But generally things that make characters look younger tend to be what people do. And figuring out what of those lines you want to keep and what of those lines you don't want to keep is going to be, I think, the primary battle for you. Sorry, this document's like 37 pages long, so I'm trying to, like, scroll up and down to figure out what are the things that I'm missing for this character. I still need to figure out what outfit I'm gonna pick. For her, I'm She's got a bunch of different ones. I love being called the girl slur, which is just being called a girl. Thanks, Twitch. I wonder how that slipped in. Yes, I always advocate for letting yourself rest a little bit. I think there was a time when I would have said to push through it. And I think for some people, pushing through it is actually the secret answer. But for the vast majority of people, I think there is a guilt in not trying to push through it. And that guilt only makes what you're feeling worse. So I think the response should be take a break, reset, and figure out why you're burnt out. Because some people are burnt out post very big project, and that makes sense, right? You spend a lot of time and energy on one thing, and once the project's done, you're like, wow, I am tired. And that makes a lot of sense. But some people are burnt out because of exceedingly difficult expectations, because they've been on a very specific grind for way too long, because they've felt like, they're pushing themselves in a way that is not healthy or not productive, but because they're afraid to not be productive, they'll keep trying and punishing themselves emotionally, and then you find yourself a couple months afterwards and you lack the motivation to even try. So my base instinct is always to tell people that taking a break is okay. I think burnouts are just a natural thing that happens sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. I think it is actually quite normal to be burnt out after a big project, or a big stint like school or something. And that it's good to take some time for yourself. Do something new. Let yourself miss doing art for a little bit. And then come back when you're ready. When you feel like, making art is no longer a chore. That making art is something that you actually want to do. I think once that is the feeling, that is when you can kind of start to come out of burnout in a more productive way. Yeah. Failure is something you learn to live with. Like, here's the thing, right, to understand about the artists that you see online. And that includes me and anyone else that you look up to. Most of us will not share our failures because why would we, right? Our online spaces are also our professional spaces. And you always want to be putting your best foot forward when you are both a business and a personal artist, whatever. So I don't post my failures. Most people don't post their failures. So what it looks like is like this person's gallery is just full of great stuff. But behind every, great file or every saved PNG or saved JPEG of a finished piece are tons and tons of files that are just lost. Things that I've just deleted because I'm like, I'm not going to try to fix this one or bring it from the brink. One-off sketches that I just didn't feel like needed to be saved. Things buried in layers and layers in a canvas that I just forgot about in a hard drive from 3 years ago. I don't share pretty much like it used to be that I didn't share maybe like 60% of what I drew. Nowadays, I don't share like 95% of what I draw. Half because I'm trying to kind of take a step back, but also because I am trying to be a little bit more private with my work when it isn't for business. But those failures exist, and the reason why I can do streams like this is because this is a performance. Always has been, right? And it's a more casual performance than it might be for other streamers. But for me, in my brain, I am still in the sense of I can't let the certain drawings fail. I've gotten better at knowing how to kind of soften the challenge on certain things so that I don't have as hard of a time drawing certain things. That's why I draw the same things, right? I almost always just draw characters in clothing, oftentimes women, because I like drawing characters in clothing. I've been doing it for a really long time. It's a little bit more difficult for me to completely fail in a drawing because it's something that I've done for so long. But I still do. I've just gotten better at fixing my mistakes, right? And I come out with something that for someone else might be really good. For me, it's sort of middling, or I'm not very happy with it, but it works. Or sometimes I come out with stuff that I'm like, hey, this is actually really cool. But that's me, right? That's me in this space currently, making sure that I don't make a terribly bad drawing, because I know how to perform in that way. But I don't share, again, 95 or 98% of what I draw. And a lot of those things, a lot of people will never see because they're not saved. They don't exist in any other space than in my sketchbook or on scrap pieces of paper or somewhere deep in my Photoshop file. They're deleted, they are discarded, they're packed away, and that happens. That just is how it is. And at no point is failure not a part of the process. I think for some people, they assume that you just kind of stop failing at a certain point, and that's not the case. Your definition for failure changes. And also, the baseline for what is quote-unquote failure changes. Because as you get better at something, when you get more and more practice at something, you learn the tricks you need in order to reach a baseline quality. So, I don't need guidelines to draw a human body because I've been drawing humans for a very long time. I've gotten used to it. That doesn't necessarily mean that my anatomy is wrong, but what that does mean is that I'm probably going to be able to place the shoulder correctly on the torso. If you ask me to draw a car, I will absolutely fail because I don't know how to draw a car and I don't draw cars, right? I don't like drawing cars, so I don't, right? And that means that if I do try to draw something I'm not used to, I go look for reference like everyone else. I practice drawing the structure from different angles. I try to prepare ahead of time. But, I don't do that on these streams, which is why you don't see me doing anything but characters. And that's because this is my comfort zone of drawing characters. And that's why it's easy for me to, appear as if I am making this easy. But it's only because after, the nth, thousandth, tens of thousands of drawings that I've made at this point in my life, I can kind of guess what it's gonna look like. I guess, like, I use this analogy a lot, but I think it really does work in this context. Like, learning a language, writing your language, your native language. Like, when you were a kid, you needed all these guides and you know, pictures and whatnot to learn how to write the letter. Then you give it meaning by learning how to write words, string them together to make, you know, sentences, all that kind of stuff. Like, you learn how to do that. Sometimes, you don't, like, you know, sometimes it could either be your handwriting is particularly bad at one point, but at no point do you really ever, like, once you've learned a language, forget how to write or create meaning with that language. Unless by some circumstance. But it's like, to a certain point, failure means something different once you learn how to write a language. Failure, once you've become a speaker or a like a fluent writer in that language, it becomes not being able to convey your thoughts properly, or not having the right words to describe a feeling or an abstract concept. It's no longer not being able to spell or not being able to write a letter, or not knowing how to you know, I guess, like, literally write at all. Your meter for what failure is changes as you get better at something. And to other people, it's like, well, you know how to do all these things, like, you can't fail. But at no point is that the case. It's just that, you know, you'll never question, once you get good at a language, you don't question whether or not you can write the letter. But that's not your problem. Your problem is not writing. Your problem is trying to convey a complicated, abstract thought, concept, convey a feeling, convey something that isn't physical through physical words. That's a new problem, and you can easily fail at that. We all know that, right? That's why there's like, writing is something that people can work towards and improve on. And the same is with art, right? What I consider a piece of failed art, or something that I felt isn't good enough or whatnot, to me 10 years ago would be crazy. Like, I would be like, but that looks so good. That looks so much better than what I can do right now. And sure, yeah, like, every piece that I do today is way better than anything I did back then. But in the context of today, my meter for what is good and what isn't, and what is considered, you know, not as successful, has changed. Because now I'm not focused on, can I draw a hand? Or can I draw, like, a jacket? Or can I draw, like, a face? My problems now are, can I convey a character of this background? Can I, you know, pose this character in a way that has this personality? When I design this piece of, you know, ensemble, or this design, is it appealing? Is it attractive? Does it fit the purpose of the character? Like, these are abstract concepts that I now deal with. And I can easily make a character design that I feel like has failed the purpose. I can easily make a drawing that I feel like didn't live up to the original idea. Doesn't change the fact that me of 10 years ago would still think it's cool. But it doesn't matter what me of 10 years ago thinks, right? It can still be a decent drawing and still not be what I wanted. It's important to recognize, like, as Tojo said, failure is just something that we have to live with. And it's not necessarily something to be afraid of. But it is just how a lot of us are going to have to... It's just something that a lot of us are going to have to grapple with. Especially with art. Because art is a painfully honest form of expression. we price ourselves in a contractual project for being an independent artist? Depends on your hourly rate. Depends on the company. I'd say if it's a professional job, as in like, you know, it's for a company or it's for commercial rights or something like that, never work below $35 an hour. That is minimum wage for a lot of unionized creatives. I wouldn't work below that at all. If it's a super big tier company, AAA, or has a lot of history, or can literally has like a ton of employees, like you can go towards asking for anywhere between 50 to 80, potentially even 90, like an hour. And I'm talking in USD, right? I go for 75 an hour. And you know, mid-tier studios or even indie studios that might not have a huge budget, sometimes I'll price a little bit lower if I really want to work for them, but I try to stick within a certain range. And personal commissions, totally dependent on what the commission is, right? So if you're working like on a contract basis, which means you're signing a contract, either that's like a full-time for a certain period of time, or just sort of a assignment by assignment basis, you should be asking for a wage that you feel like is you know, worth the time investment, worth the effort, and hopefully for a project that you are actually interested in. But I'd say no lower than $35 an hour for any kind of professional gig. Preferably higher than that, but that's base minimum for me at least. And, you know, don't be afraid to ask for something higher, because unless you're really strapped for work and you're not willing to risk not getting the job, most companies will be willing to negotiate, because if they're willing to reach out, they'll usually want to like have you on the team or have you on retainer, and they'll say, oh, that's a little out of our budget, would you be willing to work for this much, if it's too much for them. If it's not, they won't say anything. Never preemptively underprice yourself because you're afraid. And again, this is in the context of like, you're not afraid to maybe not get this job, because there are some scummy people that will rescind an offer because you asked for too much. Those people are trash. Don't work for them, okay? But most people that I've found in my career have pretty much always been willing to negotiate, because when they reach out to you, they want to work with you. So they'll say, hey, unfortunately, we can't afford that. Are you willing to work for this much? And then you can decide, is that worth it? Right? You have to think about it in terms of, these are hours of my life that I can't get back. Is it worth this amount of money? Right? So that is my advice. I'll go until 10. I feel bad because I've been talking a lot and not really drawing. So I'm gonna try and catch up on this one. But I always like answering questions too much, and then I get sidetracked. Yeah, I think there was honestly like a little bit of kind of guilt building, because I always felt really bad for not getting a ton of stuff done during the stream. And And also, I always feel bad for like advertising anything that I'm doing. So I always felt bad also like posting things on like Instagram or Twitter or something like that. So I think I think get back into the sense of just like these streams are for fun. I'm doing them because I enjoy like chatting with people, but then also just like drawing for a little bit. And the more I can reinforce that to myself, the better, because I don't know. I think I get into my head a little bit about streaming, and I really shouldn't, because my streams are not that crazy ever. For the most part, yeah. Unless I am doing something that I don't feel comfortable drawing, I pretty much will always just do everything without guidelines. I really should be, huh? Yeah, my sleep schedule has been really bad lately. Hey, Good-eyed. Yeah. I do have the PSD for every commission I've done, so if you want that, just let me know. Actually, let Toja know, because I think they're all in the G drive, yeah. Unless it's one that we did outside of the charity, but I think... If you can tell him which one it was, he can look for the name.
Thank you, Blue. I really appreciate it. Bye, Amanda. Thank you for coming.
haven't had to think about prosthetics in a very long time. Now I don't know what to do with them. Okay, sure. Fine. Fine. How long did it take for you to feel confident drawing a pose without reference? Been drawing for about 20 years. So 20 something years? So this long? How useful is it for artists to get really good at anime styles outside of Japan? I wouldn't say useful. I'd say if you like doing anime stuff, then you can certainly get a job doing that kind of stuff outside of Japan. But I don't think it's useful. I think it just is. You just have to work with whatever consequences and like the pros and cons of picking a certain style. You just have to work with, right? It's not more useful or less useful to do anime or semi-realism or whatnot. You just kind of have to figure out where is the job market for your particular style. How do you market yourself towards the people that would hire you, and finding ways to utilize your skills or figure out when you need to learn a new skill in order to compete in the market you're in. Because there are quite a few companies that do very anime related types of art. Maybe they're not nearly as prevalent where you're from. Maybe there's not really much of a market. Really kind of depends. What places would hire someone specializing in anime style? There are animation studios here that try to work in an anime style. You've got probably illustration jobs here for anything from comics to maybe even events. Freelancers could work for card art companies or card companies, tabletop games type of thing. There are I mean, there's like conventions and stuff. You could do that. You could all quite a few animation studios are also transitioning into that. Quite a few games too, like old JRPG type indie studios are always looking for that kind of stuff. Again, it depends on what style you work in. Like, there are a ton of different styles of anime, just as there are a ton of different styles of semi-realism. It ultimately depends on what kind of stuff you do, where that kind of work can be found. And how do you market yourself? Because you never really know what kind of work is available. There might always be someone looking for your kind of stuff. It just depends on, how much do you make that your brand, and how willing are you to suffer the consequences and deal with the, pros and cons of what it is that you've chosen as your path. Because you can make it work, but it might require that you do more than just characters. It might require that you also learn how to do environments and learn how to illustrate, or it might mean that you should learn how to animate or even work within animation, if not as an animator. It might ask you to pick up illustration. It might ask you to pick up both character design and prop design and environment design. It all depends, right? You can't really say for sure that yes, there's a specific place with a specific role just for you, just for your style. You have to find it. You have to figure out if you need to change in order to fit the market, or if there is a space in the market for you. I'd say be willing to change, but don't be willing to compromise what it is you enjoy doing. but or don't compromise too much, right? Depends on your situation, but I think there's more than likely a project out there for everyone, like visual novels, comics, animations, illustrations, like all of those things. And I mean, a lot of people are doing VTuber stuff now too, and people have been making pretty decent money off of that. So it ultimately depends on the quality of work and the type of work you're looking for. Have I ever felt so much rage while drawing? Yeah, probably. Can't recount a specific time, but most likely yes. It's probably more self-loathing than anything, though. Oh wait, shit, I did it again.
makes a good cleanup? I don't know what you mean by that. You know, the truthful answer is that I don't know. And that is precisely the reason why I stopped line arting and started painting back in like 2012. And now I still have that problem, so I try not to line art anything. And I just try to draw it from the beginning as clean as possible, which still sometimes ends up not being very clean, but I try not to do the whole clean up mentality because I suck at that kind of stuff. And if it wasn't for how much I hated it, I would have never learned how to paint. So honestly, I don't really have an answer for you because I don't really understand why that process kind of ruins it. I think my theory is that when you're just sketching something or it's like the first draft, you're not really so worried about kind of minute things like line thickness and small details which will like kind of affect the how you approach like drawing certain things. Once you actually start trying to clean it up, then you get super precise and specific, and you're like, purposely trying to be clean in a way that kind of prevents you from really having the same sort of freedom that you did when you were just sketching it. And it just kind of ends up destroying the original charm of the idea or the original charm of the drawing. And that's kind of my theory, but with nothing to back it up. So I don't know. But just know that I feel you, and that is precisely the reason why I stopped line arting. And even now, I don't really consider this line arting. This is my attempt to avoid it by just taking the same energy of sketching and trying to circumvent the process entirely. Which kind of means that I do end up with pretty stiff sketches sometimes. But that is something for me to work on. Bye, Asita. Hey, Lily. The theory about why sketches end up worse when you clean them up is the frenetic energy sketch pieces have is actually good for your brain. Your brain doesn't mind imperfections, sounds, blanks. Cleaner pieces with fewer blemishes are scrutinized harder because less noise needs more clarity. Yeah, I'd say it's a pretty good kind of like attempt at explaining. I do think that the whole idea of your brain filling the blanks is very much part of it. Because, yeah, I think your brain fills it in a way that is, like, appealing to you, and maybe it helps, like, keep that vision in your head alive of what you'd like it to look like, and then as soon as you start cleaning it up and trying to make decisions, it kind of just ends up falling apart a little bit more. But, I don't know. I've never been someone who I felt like was like, if I think about something in the framework of line art, for some reason it always ends up looking terrible. Like, I've tried line arting things more recently, and, like, you see me drawing in line. It's not as if I can't, but for some reason the idea of drawing something and then line arting it is such, like, a mental barrier for me that it immediately just starts to look all sorts of weird. So I try not to think about things in that way anymore, and I try to just approach it from, I'm trying to make careful decisions about the line work, but I'm still trying to maintain, the things that I focus on when I'm sketching, which is the energy and the movement and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't always work out. How much does digital and traditional art overlap in terms of skill set? Pretty much most of it. I'd say, like, the act of drawing is not very different from medium to medium. The tools, however, do change, right? I think artists who learn to paint digitally, like I did, will struggle to go the opposite way, because painting traditionally has such a different physic to it. Literally the physics of mixing paint and learning how to translate color and light within, like, in a real space to a through paint in a real space versus doing that same thing but through digital space, completely different, right? We don't have to mix paint oftentimes when painting digitally, and so that's a whole skill set that you don't learn. But painting, you're still dealing with the same stuff digitally as you are traditionally. If you're trying to render something, you're still looking at light and shadow, how that interacts with each other. Fundamentals all remain the same across pretty much all mediums, but the context by which you apply those fundamentals, that changes, I think. learning how to mix different paints is like a job in itself. Yeah. Learning how to properly mix colors is it's a whole thing to get good at. It is certainly something that there are tiers of excellence within it. Have you ever run into motivation issues with learning and getting better on weaknesses? Absolutely yes. How do you feel about people using your art as influence for their own style? I think it's fine. Like, you know, I think it's a responsibility for people that they should keep in mind of, like, you know, I don't want to, and I can't necessarily control this, right? But this is just my hope. Is that anyone who uses me as an influence, I don't mind that you do. I just hope that you'll eventually outgrow me. I hope that you'll eventually find, you know, ways to innovate that are true to you, even when they're not true to me. I think it's really nice to hear that people like my style enough. But just as I find that my style is, you know, it hasn't aged or matured in a way that I would like, I hope people also don't feel too beholden to the decisions that I make in my own art. And I hope they don't take on my bad habits either. But it is always very nice to hear that there are people who like my art enough that it influences them. I think it's a very special impact to have on someone. And I do, I feel very honored and always very lucky. But, as always, I hope that, you know, any choices you make, it's not because I make them, but it's because you think, or they align with your tastes, or you think that it is in your best interest. That is the ideal. How do you connect the head to the neck? So, if you think about the head as a sort of like whistle shape, kind of long. If I draw through, so, for me, the neck, if I were to draw it, it sort of kind of encompasses like this area of inside the head, right? So, you know, it's important to recognize that when you're looking at a skull, which is actually a lot more fun than this, Zygomatic arch here. Okay, so, you know, when you're looking at a skull, it's important to recognize that the vertebrae of your neck start at the base of the skull, right? So this is not including like muscles or anything like that. But you know, but it's important to recognize like the base of where that neck kind of like brainstem, neck, like spine starts. And then you can kind of fill in the gaps for what would be the neck muscles, which is you've got a bundle of you've got a bundle of muscles in the center of your throat, which is, you know, a bunch of stuff, including things that kind of like help cover your larynx and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, major important muscles that you have to consider are the sternocleidomastoid, right? Which is the big muscles on the side of the neck. That's kind of the big one that you have to remember is like there. It helps with quite a few things, and it helps anchor, or it anchors itself onto the clavicle, which is your collarbone. And this is, I think, the most notable muscle amongst all of them. And I use this as sort of a landmark to place the neck, right? Because it helps me remember that, like, the neck starts behind the ear. I have to think about the fact that it wraps around from the base of the skull down to the front where my collarbones are. And so that kind of helps me when I'm drawing a head to think about how the neck has to have enough mass around it so that it can encompass both the spine and the throat, and wrap around from the back of the skull, back of the base of the skull to the front of the clavicle. And that starts behind the ear, and it has to also come down a little bit so that, you know, you have the shelf of your chin, but if you really look at your own face, there's not a ton of distance between where the chin kind of flattens out underneath, and then where your neck starts. And it'll take a bit of time to figure out like what is the right distance for you. I tend to draw it a little bit more shallow than the rest, but this is what it should look like from the side, where you have this maybe about a little over a third distance between the tip of the chin to that kind of like base of the neck underneath, and then starting the neck right at the base of the skull. It's kind of an abstract thing to figure out once you start drawing the head in different directions, or different angles, but it's important to recognize that the neck is a three-dimensional form with a bunch of different muscles in it. And it's a lot thicker than for some people, and it's a lot thinner for others. Some people draw too little space between the chin and the neck. They'll like draw the neck all the way out here, or they won't give enough space and they'll draw the neck back here. Kind of have to find a middle ground between the two. And then just figure out, what's your muscle memory for that kind of stuff. Because at this point, I can kind of muscle memory my way through it. But in order to build that muscle memory, you have to kind of figure out for yourself, where does that neck start and where does it end? This is kind of how I rationalize it. Who's your favorite in Hunter x Hunter? Watching the Chimera arc right now, and it's intense. I will get up and stretch in a second. And drink water. My favorite character is, Killua? Killua and Gon are both my favorite characters, which is so basic, but I love them a lot. And I have one dumbass favorite in Hunter x Hunter, that I don't know why I like him. He dies the first episode he's announced. But every time I see him, I'm like, yeah. Let me see if I can find a picture of him. He's like one of the first victims in the Greed Island arc. But I can never remember his name because they don't really say his name. Jispa. This dumbass dies in the first 20 minutes of him being introduced, and yet I still like him. So, I like Gon and Killua in Hunter x Hunter, and then I, for some reason, really like this guy. He's stupid as hell, doesn't have a ton of dialogue, and he dies within 20 minutes of being introduced, but for some reason, every time he's on screen, my heart skips a beat a little bit. Hi, Tate. Welcome back. It's been a hot minute. But yeah, so those are my favorite Hunter x Hunter characters. I mean, I honestly like a lot of them. Like, I even like, Hisoka, and Hisoka is weird. He's really weird. In like, almost kind of not an okay way, but, but yeah, I don't know. Hunter x Hunter is so great for having just like such a multitude of really interesting characters that look super different and have a bunch of different powers. And I like a lot of the side characters too. But Gon and Killua are my favorite for sure. Oops. Cool. Give me a second. I will be right back. cool. Let's finish up this leg. How do I draw hair? Or how do you draw hair? So when I think of hair, I think of pieces of paper or like tubes, I guess. It starts by thinking of hair like a piece of paper that twists. Right. And you can do this with like cloth too. I think cloth and hair have a lot of things in common because they're both things that are impacted by what's underneath it and kind of like the pull of gravity. And they show that really well because hair is made up of a bunch of different strands and fabric is made up of also a bunch of different strands. And so, you know, I think about hair in kind of like a paper or fabric-like way. When, you know, hair is falling off of something, like how would that react? Typically you want to clump strands of hair together, and if you're more of a stylistic person, and it allows you to kind of feel like more in control of the shape of the hair versus like all the little tiny strands and details. And as long as you think about hair always coming from a central point, which is the scalp, and having it kind of radiate outwards, that's kind of the basics of hair, really. And then it's sort of learning how to draw all the different textures of hair, whether or not that's, you know, learning how to draw curls, kind of finding a balance for like thicker to thinner hair, whether that is, you know, finding your way of describing like straight, curly, dreadlocks, braided, you know, beaded hair, like all those different types of ways that hair can exist. Then it just becomes like a matter of detailing that out. But basics of hair, very much like fabric, it all originates from the scalp, radiates out, and then is subject to gravity, right? If it helps, think of it like paper or maybe like tubes, like cylinders that have to like fall and kind of interact with each other. I think about it like this whenever I have to draw braids, is I'll think of them like interweaving corded, braided corded, like wire or tubes of mass, and then kind of add hair on top of that, you know. So as long as you think of hair as three-dimensional, I think you'll have a much easier time communicating that. Because a lot of people don't think of hair as three-dimensional. They think of it as very flat and two-dimensional, and it kind of gets them into a spot where they're just sort of drawing hair and drawing lines to just sort of give it the sense of strands, but they're not actually drawing the shape of it, and they're not actually putting any thought into you know, like, what is this shape supposed to represent? How am I supposed to, like, basically grooming the character to create the shape of hair that you want and give them, like, a nice style so that it matches their personality. All of that comes from having control of the shape of the hair, having, you know, a very, like, specific silhouette that it creates. Easiest way to do that, clump it together so that you don't have as many pieces to work with. What's my favorite animation studio? I don't really watch a ton of animated stuff anymore, I guess. Like, I'll watch the newest animation that comes out, but I don't really follow studios. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really follow studios. For animation, at least. What superpowers do you think you would have based on your personality? My personality? Well, I guess like just like a fun fact about me. I've always been really good at finding things. Super cat lady. Like if my partner Gary, if he ever sees something on the internet and he doesn't know how to find it again, for some reason I've been really good at figuring out or finding links to things or like googling stuff, like or even there was one time when he was like doing something weird with his hands and he flung his ring off of his finger, and we couldn't find it while we were driving, so we stopped the car when we got to wherever we were going and we were looking for it, and I found it, and the only reasonable trajectory was he somehow flung it and it went through a hole in between the seats in the back seat and went straight into the trunk. But they were looking for that ring forever, and I was the one that found it. I guess just because, like, I don't know, I've always been pretty good at finding things once they like fall on the floor or whatever, so I think that might be my superpower, because I do really enjoy it. Like, there was a time when my partner and I, we were joking that we didn't know each other's addresses, and so he wasn't gonna let me buy him food and have it delivered, so I went, and I don't know street names, but I went and traced the path of the car drive we took to his house that we went once. So I took what I remembered of that car ride, planted key points of like along the road of like, I remember we passed a gas station here that was next to this shopping center, and then there was like, we passed this street name I remember, and I managed to narrow down his address after having only been there once and not knowing street names at all. So whatever superpower that is, I think that's probably mine. Hey Oracle, how are you? Oh, well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you can make it. Let's see. What I'm definitely missing stuff on this commission. Lily, don't eat Peach's food. Lily, no! Stop! Think with your brain. Have a conscience. Don't eat Peach's food. No!
This cat is not gonna listen.
The trend.
Nope, nope, nope. Lily. Lily. You know, funnily enough, I don't actually like Vi's design. I think her gauntlets are cool, but that's just because I like brawlers with giant gauntlets, you know? As far as Vi's actual design in League of Legends, not so much. I like the arcane version of her, but that's not Vi, really, canonically. But I am a big sucker for gauntlets. Brawler type fists. Make sure I've gotten Yes, we're going in the order that we received them, so it's earlier or older orders and then newer ones are at the bottom. This is it. Let me just make sure that I got everything. Do you have a goal
you are specifically pursuing with your work? Sort of. I have, like, things that I would like to accomplish, but, hard to describe. They're not really as solid as, like, real goals, but have things I'd like to achieve, for sure. Both personal and, like, professional. So there's, like, technical stuff where I'm like, I want to get better at this and this and then whatnot, but, there's also more abstract stuff. Yeah. Is the brush a custom brush? It is. I don't know where I got this one. I just, anytime I see a brush that I might like or enjoy, I buy it. I have an obsession with buying brush packs. It's a problem. I still do. That's why I have like thousands and thousands of brushes that I don't use, that are in my brush pack, but I try out on occasion. And it's fun. I have a different one for each mood that I'm in. But okay, since it's like 10:30, I'll probably end it here, even though I only got one done. But because a lot of you guys had questions, and I'm happy to answer them. So, we're just chilling out for today. But does anyone have any, like, last-minute questions that I can answer? Because if not, then I'll probably call it here, since it is pretty late. But yeah, any things that you wanted answered that you didn't get to ask before, you can ask it now. Do you think it's important to have an understanding of simplified anatomy when doing gesture drawing? I think it's very important to have an understanding of anatomy regardless. But especially, you know, as soon as you start drawing characters, and especially with gesture drawing, I think, you know, basics of anatomy are definitely important. When do charity comms come back again? So once this is done and I've taken a break from doing charity commissions, we're going to sort of think about, you know, what worked last time, what didn't, how we can streamline it and make it easier. And if, you know, there is a suitable charity that we want to do, either for a current crisis or for the holiday season, we will figure that out. What are the prices? I'm not sure. I'm thinking of raising the prices this time moving forward because the amount that we got oops, sorry. It's probably because I haven't been drinking water. I will drink water. The likelihood is that the prices will change a little bit because we got quite a few commissions in the hundreds in the last one, and I would rather not take too long to deliver them. So I'll probably raise the prices a little bit for the charity. But we're gonna figure all that out, and I will let everyone know what that is when we do the next charity fundraiser thing. But yeah, imagine that they'll be probably between, like, all the sketches were $20, and I think the highest price was an $80 headshot, colored headshot. So most likely it'll be anywhere between like 75 for headshot. Okay, so it'll be under $100. I might do something. I might push the headshots over, but maybe like anywhere of like the range of 30-40 being the low end, 100 lower than that for high end. I don't know, but we'll see. We'll figure that out. Nothing promised just yet. Tips on drawing hair. I mentioned this earlier, but just think of hair as coming out of the scalp, right? You have to always connect it back to the scalp. And clump your hair together into pieces so that it's a lot easier for you to build like a shape or a silhouette out of it. Hair, very much like fabric, has physics to it. It's very much dependent on the context of the hair, whether or not it's thicker, braided, frizzy, if it's got curls in it, if it's straight, if it's thin, if it's, you know, whatnot. And that will affect how much it is affected by what's underneath it, like shoulders, ears, the face, how it lays down if it's really long, or how it is when it's tied up, how it is when it's braided together, and that's the same for fabric, right? Depending on the texture of the fabric and how it's made, how thick it is, that'll change what it looks like when it's affected by gravity and when it's placed on an irregularly shaped object. So important to think about it in that way. It's all coming from the top of the head, from the scalp. But otherwise, it's hanging down unless it's very specifically styled. So think of it like fabric, or like paper, or like tubes of mass, right? Think of hair like 3D, like a three-dimensional object. And think about gravity pulling on it and how it's going to arrange itself over whatever it's laying on top of, whether or not that's someone's chest or shoulders or whatnot. If you weren't in video games, where do you think you would want to work in? I think animation would be cool. Comics. I've always wanted to make a graphic novel, but I've never tried, so I don't know if I could, but I think that'd be pretty fun. So who knows? Maybe someday. But for now, games is definitely a pretty diverse place to work in terms of like the types of projects. Tons of different genres, tons of different types of people, tons of different technologies, and so it kind of keeps things interesting because you never know, what people are working on and the sort of different demands that people have working on certain teams. So for now, that's still kind of my main focus. But I like art in general, right? So I'm always interested to see what people are working on the other side of the fence. But yeah, I don't know if anyone has any last questions, but if not, I will end the stream here. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for hanging out with me. I'm always very grateful when people come by and ask questions. It gives me something to do and say whenever I'm streaming. But I'm also grateful for anyone who's stuck around just to watch, just to listen. What's happening next Friday? Whoops. I don't think I have anything planned for next Friday, so we should be good to still be streaming. I will let you all know if that's not the case, but for now, I think we should be good. So keep an eye on either the Discord, or I will, you won't, if you check the page, you won't see me streaming, then I'm not streaming, but so far, currently, as of right now, we should be good for next Friday. But yes, if no one has any other questions, thank you so much for coming. I love you all very, very much. Take care of yourselves. I hope you do something that you enjoy or something that makes you happy this coming week, and I will talk to you all later. Mwah.